I was 72 that Christmas, sitting at my son Grady's long farmhouse table, trying to enjoy the roast that smelled like the Decembers my late wife, Lila, used to make. Candlelight danced on the windows. Silverware clinked. Grady raised his glass and said, "To Dad, finally letting us take care of him." Everyone clapped. My head swam. Heat rushed to my cheeks. My tongue felt heavy. I stood with a smile I did not feel and said I would grab some water. The room stretched like a hallway in a dream as I made my way to the kitchen. At the sink, the faucet hissed and the cold stream steadied my hand. I told myself this was age or excitement, but the dizziness had sharp corners. My vision fuzzed, then cleared, then fuzzed again. I reached for my bourbon tumbler to rinse it, and that was when I saw it. On the counter, near the glass, a small mound of blue powder, fine as chalk dust. A spoon lay beside it, sticky and wrong. My heart kicked hard. A chill ran across my scalp. I leaned closer, and the room held its breath with me. Sloane, my daughter-in-law, slipped in as soft as perfume. "Something wrong, Alden?" she asked. Her smile stayed bright while her eyes measured me. She moved to the sink and flicked on the spray. Her hand darted. The spoon vanished under the water, turning the powder into a ghost. She reached past my glass and nudged it toward the drain. I caught her wrist gently. "Leave that," I said. She laughed in a way that asked anyone listening to join in. No one answered. The faucet went on hissing. My stomach clenched. From the dining room, I heard the kids argue over peppermint bark. Grady told a loud story about his new deal. The Christmas playlist tried to make everything normal. Sloane opened a cabinet and pretended to search for plates. She slid a small orange bottle into her sweater pocket with a move so tidy it made me sick. My granddaughter Wren peeked around the doorway and vanished when Sloane sent her a bright smile. I felt a strange distance, like the kitchen was a stage, and I had finally noticed the props. Memories snapped into a clean line. The last few Sundays at their house, I had grown sleepy after dinner in a way I never do at home. I had woken on the couch with my belt unbuckled and my pockets lighter than I remembered. I told myself I was forgetful. I told myself grief had made me careless. I heard Lila's voice from that last morning we had together. "People will love you for what you give them. Alden, see who loves you when you cannot give." My throat tightened. I set the water down and steadied my breath. I took half a step, and the dizziness cut me like ice. This was not ordinary. It had edges and intent. In the window, my reflection showed Sloane behind me, smiling for an audience that was not here. She moved toward my glass again. I felt my father's voice in my chest, low and steady. "Leave the glass," I said. She froze for a moment, then gave a soft shrug. "You should sit, Alden." Big night. Her hand hovered at my elbow like I was a piece of fragile furniture she planned to move. Grady appeared in the doorway, cheeks warm from wine. "Dad, come on. Dessert is waiting." Sloane's eyes flicked to him with a look that said later. He missed it. Sons miss things when they trust the wrong person. I kept my eyes on Sloane and slid my phone from my pocket. The screen wavered, then steadied. "There's a number you do not dial unless you mean it." My thumb pressed. The ringing sounded like a lifeline across a river. 911. "What is your emergency?" the operator asked. My voice found its strength. "This is Alden Pierce. I am at my son's home on Juniper Lane in Cedar Ridge. I believe I have been drugged." There was a pause, then clear questions. I answered them all. Sloane stepped closer, a calm storm building behind her eyes. Grady called again from the dining room, as if volume could fix what was broken. The lights felt too bright. The kitchen smelled like pine cleaner and a wrong sweetness. Sloane's voice came smooth and careful, as if she were already telling the story to someone else. "Alden, you are confused. You took your pills on an empty stomach. Let me get you ginger tea." She was good. She had the kind of kindness that folds over truth until it suffocates. I kept my eyes on her hands. The orange bottle bulged against her sweater pocket. I imagined the pills rattling like a small storm. My fingers stopped shaking. A strange calm slid into my bones. I thought about what I stood to lose. Not just my house or my money, which I never flaunted. Not the trucks I sold years ago or the quiet 22% I kept, tucked away in a trust Lila named the Walnut Fund. I stood to lose my name, my mind, the right to say no. I stood to lose the way Ren looked at me like I hung the moon. I stood to lose the last thing men like me own when everything else has been handed over, which is our dignity. I faced Sloan. Phone still in my ear, the operator asking if the door was unlocked. I told her yes. I told her the truth would be here when they arrived. Sloan studied my face, calculating whether the old widower had enough sense left to be a problem. She saw a man who fixed toys on the floor and nodded at brochures for assisted living. She did not see the man who built a company from a cold warehouse floor, who kept apparel alive in winter, who buried his wife and learned how to keep breathing. What she did not know was who she was really dealing with. I grew up in a rail town where the morning whistle set the rhythm, and the diner opened before the sun. My first job was sweeping a warehouse floor for $3 an hour. I learned how to listen to engines and how to keep promises, even the small ones. When I met Lila at a church bake sale, she laughed at my nervous joke and handed me a slice of pie I could not afford. We married in a small room with folding chairs. We had more hope than money, and we treated both like something we could grow. Work was my language. I drove delivery trucks across state lines and slept in cabs that smelled like diesel and coffee. I learned the back roads by feel and counted miles the way other men count prayers. When the company I worked for started cutting routes, I did not wait for the axe to fall. I bought a beat-up rig on credit and took the overflow jobs no one wanted. Lila handled the calls with a notebook and a pencil behind her ear. We were young and exhausted and stubborn. When Grady was born, I held him like a secret I wanted to keep forever. I promised Lila I would be home more, then broke that promise for the light bill and the mortgage. She forgave me and taped his drawings to the fridge so I could see what I was missing. I hired a second driver named Deshaun, a quiet man with quick hands and a wife who worked nights. We watched out for each other. I bought another truck, then another. We never missed payroll. Some months we paid ourselves last, but we paid everyone. The first winter nearly beat us. Fuel prices climbed and 2 engines failed in the same week. I sold my fishing boat to cover repairs and told Lila we would fish from shore. She made a picnic for the riverbank and called it a date. That was Lila. She could make dignity out of leftovers. By spring, we had 6 contracts and the phones rang enough to sound like hope. I learned spreadsheets because she said we could not run a company on napkins forever. She was right, and I like hearing it. Success is loud from the outside and quiet inside the house where it is earned. We kept a little blue place on Cedar Street. I mowed my own lawn. Lila taught Grady to bake banana bread because she said every man should know one recipe by heart. When we could, we helped people who'd been told no one would hire them. Men with gaps in their resumes. Women who needed a schedule that fit their kids. We did not ask for thanks. We asked for hard work and honesty. That was our whole code. Years later, a national carrier came knocking. They wanted our routes and our reputation. I thought about my drivers and about mornings when the wind sliced in my coat. I sold a majority stake so the company could grow beyond me. I kept a quiet piece of it, signed into a trust Lila named the Walnut Fund. She said strong trees grow slow and keep their roots hidden. We told no one, not because we were ashamed, but because we wanted a life that still felt like ours. I still drove some mornings for the comfort of it. When illness came for Lila, it did not knock. It seeped in and took up space. I learned the names of new medicines and the weight of waiting rooms. I sat beside her for treatments and read her the weather report like we were planning a picnic we would never take. She was brave in a way that never asked for applause. On a quiet evening, she gave me advice like a gift. Stay humble, Alden. Wear your kindness like work clothes. And never let anyone tell you your worth is over when you get old. I set up papers with an attorney named Nora Keene, a steady woman with sharp eyes that missed nothing. We updated the will, the trust, the medical forms. We created a letter of wishes written in my own hand, plain and direct. We added a safe deposit box with documents and an old fountain pen Lila gave me when we bought our first truck. We told Grady we had things in order, then changed the subject to his future. He married Sloan a few years after Lila passed. I tried to see what he saw. I wanted to. Grady's world moved faster than mine. Apps and pitches and loud rooms where deals were made in the air. He came to me for advice when the numbers hurt his head. I gave it in short sentences and quiet money behind the scenes. I helped when his startup hit a wall, then stepped back so he could climb it. I do not say this to boast. It is only the truth. My life was service. Fix the leak. Haul the load. Make the call. Take the blow for the people you love. And keep your mouth shut about it. Through it all, I stayed small on purpose. Same house. Same boots. Same coffee at the diner with men who knew the price of an honest day. There's a kind of power in not needing to be seen. But power is also a responsibility. It asks you to be ready when storms show their teeth. Standing in that kitchen on Christmas, with dizziness cutting me into pieces, I realized every mile and every sacrifice had brought me to this crossroads. He had no idea that my years of sacrifice were about to be tested in ways I never imagined. The paramedics arrived within minutes, red lights flashing against the snow that lined Grady's driveway. They found me sitting in the armchair by the tree, pale but steady. Sloan hovered close, her hand resting on my shoulder as if to prove she cared. "He's been forgetful lately," she said before they even asked. "He probably took his pills twice. We've been worried about him." Her tone was sweet and practiced. The lead medic looked from her to me, his eyes calm but searching. "Sir, do you know what day it is?" "Christmas Eve," I said, holding his gaze, and I think someone put something in my drink. The room froze for half a heartbeat. Grady laughed nervously, too loud, like a man cracking a joke in courtroom. "Dad, come on. No one here would ever do that." The medic didn't laugh. He nodded and asked for my glass. Sloan hesitated, then handed him a fresh one from the counter, the one she'd rinsed clean. "That's not it," I said. "Mine's in the sink." He retrieved it carefully, placed it in a plastic evidence bag, and whispered to his partner. Grady looked embarrassed. "You see what stress does to him," he told the medic. "He's been through a lot since Mom died." I almost corrected him, but I was too tired to fight the narrative. They wanted me to be weak. It made things easier for them. At the hospital, the test began. The nurses spoke softly, avoiding pity but wrapping it in professionalism. I overheard Sloan explaining to one of them that I'd been showing early signs. She said I sometimes forgot names, misplaced money, or mixed up my medications. I wanted to laugh at how neatly she'd prepared the story. The doctor asked if I felt safe at home. I told him I wasn't sure what safe meant anymore. He looked at me for a long moment and nodded, as if he'd heard that answer before. The results weren't immediate, so they kept me overnight for observation. Grady sat in the corner, scrolling through his phone. "Dad," he said, without looking up, "you got to stop scaring everyone. Sloan's been trying to help you. You're making it hard." "Help me?" I asked quietly. "By cleaning my glass before I can finish a drink." He sighed. "You're being paranoid. Look, we love you, but you've got to accept when you need support. You can't live alone forever." "I've lived alone longer than you've been married," I said, "and I'm still standing." That shut him up, but only for a minute. He muttered something about stubborn old men, then left to get coffee. He didn't come back that night. When the hospital discharged me the next day, I went back home instead of to their house. My front porch was cold and quiet, the kind of silence that feels like safety. My neighbor rose away from across the street. "You okay, Mr. Pierce?" she called. "I think so," I said. "Just tired." She frowned. "You call if you need anything, you hear? I got strong coffee and louder opinions." That made me smile. Rosa had a way of saying small things that held big truths. 2 days later, Grady showed up on my porch with Sloan in tow. "Dad, we were worried," he said, stepping inside without waiting for an answer. "You shouldn't be alone right now." "I'm fine," I said. "No," Sloan corrected gently. "You're not. You're forgetting things. It's not safe." She opened a folder and handed me brochures for senior living communities. "These places are wonderful. Alden. Nurses on site. social activities, meals prepared for you. You'd love it. I looked at the pictures. Smiling elderly people playing cards, bright halls, everything spotless. It looked more like a waiting room for dying than a home. I'm not ready for that, I said. Sloane's smile tightened. It's not about ready. It's about responsible. Grady avoided my eyes. We've already made a few calls, he added. There's a room open next month. I realized then it wasn't suggestion. It was a plan. They decided for me. I felt something cold settle in my chest, heavier than fear. You'll have to cancel, I said, voice steady, because I'm staying right here. Sloane's tone turned sharp. Dad, don't be difficult. You could hurt yourself. You could burn the house down. I met her gaze. If you're so worried about fires, stop pouring things into my drinks. The air thickened. Grady slammed the folder shut. Enough. You need rest. I walked him to the door. Rest is for people who trust who's watching over them. That was the beginning of the pattern. Every week brought new acts of concern that cut like tiny blades. Sloane reorganized my medicine cabinet for safety and swapped labels when she thought I wasn't looking. Grady told me he was handling my finances to reduce stress. My bills stopped arriving in the mail. My debit card stopped working. Each time I asked, he had a reason. Bank glitch. Automatic payment issue. You probably misplaced something again, Dad. I knew better, but I pretended not to, just to see how far they'd go. When I did visit, Sloane made a show of caring for me. Here, Dad, have your vitamin drink. I stopped drinking anything she poured, but she didn't seem to notice. I kept my tone calm, my face unreadable. It's easier to fight a snake when it doesn't know you've seen it. Still, the disrespect ate at me in small, daily bites. They talked over me in conversations. They spoke about my health in front of strangers. They used the past tense when describing things I still did. Dad used to drive trucks, Grady would say, and I'd sit there thinking, I still can. The first real crack came when Rosa dropped by one afternoon with a pot of stew. She glanced around my kitchen. You look pale, she said. I haven't had much appetite. I admitted. Your son come by? I hesitated. Yes, too often. She nodded slowly. You tell him to mind his own pot next time. Then she handed me a small wooden cross from her church. Keep this. Sometimes you've got to let people see you're not alone. I didn't believe much in luck or symbols, but I kept it in my pocket anyway. Days passed. The mistreatment grew quieter but more consistent. Grady had started calling every night around the same time, asking casual questions about my accounts, my schedule, what medications I was taking. He called it checking in. It felt like reconnaissance. I answered carefully. I knew better than to give an enemy free information, even if the enemy carried your last name. There were moments that broke through the dread. Ren, my granddaughter, was one of them. She was 9, curious and unfiltered like her grandmother used to be. Grandpa, she asked one evening, why do you always nap here, but not at your house? Because your house makes me sleepy, I said. She frowned. Mom says you forget things, but I don't think you do. She handed me a folded drawing. It was a picture of my old truck with wings and a halo. Beneath it, she'd written Grandpa's truck can fly anywhere. I nearly cried right there. That kind of faith doesn't come from adults. It comes from truth that still remembers how to trust. But even faith can't fight poison alone. The test results finally came back from the hospital 2 weeks later. They showed traces of a sedative I wasn't prescribed. The doctor called and asked if I'd recently changed my medication. I told him no. Then someone did it for you, he said quietly. I thanked him and hung up before my voice could betray me. My hands trembled, not from fear, but from fury. The pattern wasn't paranoia. It was proof. The next Sunday dinner felt like theater. I watched Sloane move through her kitchen, graceful, efficient, controlling every plate and pour. Grady laughed at his own jokes, pretending the air wasn't full of cracks. When she reached for my glass, I lifted it first, holding it midair. Let's toast, I said. To what? Sloane asked. To honesty. Her hand froze. then continued pouring as if she hadn't heard me. I didn't drink. That night, when I got home, I locked every door and took out the envelope Lila had made me promise to keep sealed until I truly needed it. Inside was her handwriting, looping and careful. If the day comes when love turns cruel, remember who you were before them. The man who built, the man who fought, the man who survives. I read it twice. I slept little. By morning, something inside me had shifted. I'd spent my life fixing problems for everyone else. But this time, the problem was mine to solve, and I wasn't going to use forgiveness to do it. Over the next week, I started gathering small clues. The pharmacy logs, bank statements, receipts. Every time Sloan handed me something for my convenience, I made a copy. I wrote dates on the back of envelopes and tucked them under the floorboard in my study. The more I learned, the clearer it became. This wasn't care, it was control. Grady was the voice. Sloan was the hand. And I was the target. Still, I kept my calm. I smiled when they called. I nodded when they offered help. I thanked them for their concern. But inside, I was rebuilding something I thought I'd buried with Lila, a quiet, unbreakable resolve. The world likes to forget what older men can do when they stop being patient. And as I folded Lila's letter back into its envelope, I realized something that made my heart steady for the first time in months. I was done being everyone's doormat. It was time to remind them who they were really dealing with. I began my quiet investigation the way I used to start long hauls, by checking the mirrors and taking a breath. At 72, I was supposed to be slowing down, but that night something old and sharp woke up in me. The same instinct that once kept me alive on black ice was back. Only this time, the danger wasn't on the highway. It was sitting across my family table. The next morning, I called Nora Keene, my attorney. She had been with me through the sale of my company, through Lila's will, through everything that required calm thinking. Her voice was crisp as always. "Alden, start from the beginning," she said. So I told her about the powder, the glass, the hospital results. She listened without interrupting, only asking for dates and details. When I finished, she exhaled softly. "You're not paranoid," she said. "You're a target." Nora came by that afternoon with her leather briefcase and the air of someone about to fix a broken system. She took photos of the orange bottle I had found in Sloan's pocket and the medical report that confirmed the sedative. She called a contact at the pharmacy and, within hours, had proof that the prescription wasn't mine. It was filled under a different patient's name, someone who lived 3 towns away. "This isn't a mix-up," she said. "This is deliberate." Her words landed like nails in a board. I finally had confirmation that my fear had weight. After she left, I made another call to Deshaun, my oldest driver. He'd retired years ago, but he still called me boss and refused to let time change that. "What's going on, old man?" he asked. "I need your eyes on something," I said. "It's family business. Quiet work." There was a pause. Then his voice softened. "Say no more. I'll bring my camera." 2 days later, he was parked across from Grady's house in his old pickup, camera on the seat beside him. He had learned patience on the road. Waiting came easy to him. He watched deliveries, visitors, movements. Within a week, he had photos of Sloan meeting a man behind her boutique, hands exchanging envelopes, expressions tight and urgent. He sent me the pictures without comment. I didn't need one. I had seen that look before in men who owed money they couldn't pay. While Deshaun handled the watching, I handled the numbers. I went to the bank early one morning and requested copies of every statement from the past year. The clerk hesitated until I reminded her that the accounts were mine alone. The paperwork took half an hour to print. Sitting at the small counter, I saw transactions I didn't recognize. Online transfers. Small withdrawal space just right to avoid attention. The handwriting on one withdrawal slip wasn't mine. It was neat and deliberate, the loops identical to Sloan's. Nora met me at the diner that afternoon. I spread the papers across the table. "She's been testing the limits," I said. "She's smart," Nora replied, flipping through the pages, "but not smart enough. These amounts are structured to see if anyone notices." Next step, is larger sums. We'll block that path before she gets there. How? By freezing your accounts under elder fraud protection. Quietly. She won't know until she tries again. That night, I couldn't sleep. I thought about Lila's last request, stay humble, but not blind. I realize humility doesn't mean letting people walk over you. It means knowing when to stand tall, without shouting. I poured myself a glass of water, the only thing I trusted anymore, and sat by the window, watching the snow drift under the streetlight. My reflection looked older, yes, but also steadier. The man in the glass still had work to do. The next day, Deshawn called. "Boss, you won't like this," he said. "That fella Sloane's been meeting? He's a debt collector. Boutique's 3 months behind on rent. I heard her telling him your name. Said you'd cover things soon." My stomach turned. So that was the plan. Slowly drain me under the excuse of care. Then use my assets to clean their own slate. "Keep watching," I said, "and don't let her see you." Meanwhile, I began building allies. Rosa, my neighbor, became my lookout. She pretended to bring casseroles, but really came to check if anyone had been inside my house while I was out. Reverend Cole from church offered to keep a spare key for emergencies. He didn't know the full story, but he knew enough to pray with his sleeves rolled up. Bit by bit, I built a small circle of people who remembered who I was before I became old Alden who needs help. The turning point came when I visited my bank again. The manager, a young man who spoke in corporate scripts, smiled as he asked if I had recently granted power of attorney to my son. My jaw tightened. "No," I said. "Why?" He blinked. "We received a notarious document. Looked legitimate." He pulled it up on his screen, tilting it slightly toward me. My heart thudded as I recognized the forged signature. My name, written in Sloane's precise hand, and Grady's signature beneath it. "Print that," I said, "and make sure your compliance department gets a copy of my ID right now. That form's a lie." The manager flushed and apologized. I didn't yell. I just watched him correct the record, one click at a time. When I told Nora, she pursed her lips. "They're escalating. She's using your trust against you." "What's next, then?" I asked. "We document everything. Photos, signatures, call logs. Then we go to law enforcement, but only when we have enough to make it stick. Until then, we let her think she's winning." So that's what I did. I went back to Sunday dinners and smiled. I let her pour my drink, but this time I only pretended to sip. I let her hover, fuss, and whisper to Grady about my decline. Meanwhile, I carried a small recorder in my pocket, nothing fancy, just enough to capture conversations. I caught her once telling Grady, "If we move fast, we can transfer everything before the bank freezes it." Grady didn't reply, but he didn't stop her either. That silence told me everything. By mid-January, we had a folder thick with evidence. Nora met with Detective Morales, a man in his 40s who handled elder abuse cases. He listened without interrupting, then said quietly, "We'll need one more incident. Something recent and clear. Then we can act." I wasn't sure if I wanted that incident, but I knew it would come. People like Sloane always overplay their hand. A week later, Sloane called me, her voice syrupy. "Alden, we found the perfect assisted living place. They have an opening this month. Grady and I will drive you there Saturday for a tour." "That sounds nice," I said, matching her tone. "Let's have dinner after. I'll bring a surprise." The day before the tour, I stood in my kitchen, the same one where I'd found that blue powder, and looked out the window. Snowflakes drifted slow and silent, just like before. I thought about the life I'd built, the sacrifices I'd made, and the woman who had trusted me to protect what we created. "I'm still here, Lila," I whispered, "and I'm not done yet." Armed with everything I'd learned, I was ready to teach them a lesson they'd never forget. The day of the tour dawned bright and deceptively peaceful. The sun glinted off the frosted lawns along Juniper Lane, and the town still carried that after-Christmas calm where even time seemed to rest. I dressed carefully, a pressed blue flannel, clean jeans, and the boots Lila bought me for our last anniversary. I shaved, combed my hair, and looked in the mirror until I recognized a man staring back. He looked older, yes, but steady, capable. A man who'd built and rebuilt. A man who still had work to do. I tucked the small recorder into my jacket pocket, checked a tiny red light, and slipped a folder of evidence beneath the passenger seat of my truck. Then I made a few phone calls. First to Nora, to confirm she'd sent the documents to Detective Morales, time-stamped and certified. Then to Deshawn, who was parked 3 blocks away with his camera ready. Finally, I called Rosa. "You'll see cars on my drive today," I said. "Don't worry unless the lights stay on after dark." She hesitated, then said softly, "You're doing what you have to, Alden. I'll be watching." At noon sharp, Grady's SUV rolled into my driveway. He honked twice, cheerful and rehearsed. I walked out with my cane, unnecessary but useful for effect. Sloane sat in the passenger seat, sunglasses on, a clipboard balanced on her lap. "Big day, Alden," she said as I climbed in. "You'll love this place. It's like a resort." "I'm sure it is," I said, buckling my seatbelt. "You two thought of everything." Grady smiled, relieved at my calm. He didn't notice the quiet shift in the air, the kind of stillness before a storm. As we drove, Sloane chatted about amenities, gardens, art classes, on-site medical staff. Every word slid out smooth and sugary. I nodded and let her talk. The recorder picked up everything. The facility sat on the edge of town, all brick and manicured hedges. The sign out front read, Cedar Ridge Haven. It looked pleasant enough, but my gut twisted at the sight. They guided me through polished hallways that smelled like lemon polish and faint despair. The director, a brisk woman with kind eyes, shook my hand. "We'd love to welcome you, Mr. Pierce. Your son and daughter-in-law have already completed most of the paperwork." I froze. "They what?" Sloane jumped in smoothly. "Just the preliminary forms. To save time, of course. Nothing binding." The director looked uncertain. "Well, actually, the deposit cleared yesterday. We just need your final signature." My chest tightened, but I kept my face neutral. "Of course," I said slowly. "May I see the forms?" She handed me the folder. At the top was a contract for long-term residency. My name was printed neatly. The signature beneath it wasn't mine. It was close enough for someone who didn't know my hand. I studied the curve of the P, the slant of the E. It was Sloane's work. My pulse steadied. This was it. "Looks in order to me," Sloane said brightly, moving closer. "Dad, why don't you just sign the confirmation page?" I handed the folder back to the director. "I'll take it home first. My attorney will review it." Grady sighed, rubbing his temple. "Dad, come on. Don't start with the lawyer stuff again. You're tired. We're just trying to help." "I know you are," I said softly. "You've been helping a lot lately." I smiled thinly. "Almost too much." The director shifted uneasily. "Perhaps we can give Mr. Pierce a moment to think." We stepped outside into the cold. I leaned on my cane, pretending to catch my breath. "You know," I said, "Lila and I once talked about places like this." She said they were fine for folks who'd lost their fight. I looked up at Sloane. "You think I've lost mine?" Her mouth tightened. "You're twisting this, Alden. You can't live alone forever. You're not well. That's the story you've been telling, isn't it?" Grady stepped between us. "Stop it, both of you. We're doing what's best for everyone." I stared at him. "You believe that, don't you?" "I do," he said. That was all I needed to hear. The truth had set itself out neatly on the table. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't argue. I simply said, "Let's go home." The drive back was silent. Sloane scrolled through her phone. Grady drummed the steering wheel, oblivious to the battle he'd just lost. I stared out the window, watching the snow melt into the asphalt. The trap was ready. All that was left was to spring it. When we reached my house, I invited them in for dinner. "One last meal before the move," I said, smiling. Grady hesitated but followed. Sloane, hungry for victory, agreed quickly. "Of course," she said. "Your family." Inside, the table was already set. Rosa had helped earlier, pretending it was just another Sunday supper. A roast sat warming in the oven, the scent filling the room. On the counter were 2 bottles, one of bourbon, one of water. I poured a drink for Grady and a glass of water for myself. "Sit," I said. "Let's eat like a family should." Sloane took her place at the head of the table, comfortable in her role as organizer. "This looks wonderful, Alden. Lila's recipe," I said. I thought it was fitting. I began carving the roast, the knife glinting under the light. We ate in strained politeness. Between bites, Sloane slipped into her usual rhythm. Small compliments, subtle corrections, constant control. Grady laughed at the wrong times. I let them talk, let them think I'd surrendered. Halfway through the meal, I stood. "You two have worked so hard for me," I said. "I've been thinking. It's time I showed my appreciation." I reached into my coat and pulled out a thick envelope. "This is for you." Sloane's eyes lit up. "Alden, that's not necessary." "Oh, it is." I set the envelope on the table. "But before you open it, I'd like to make a toast." I raised my glass of water. "To family," I said, "to love that lasts through hard times, and to the truth, because eventually it finds its way home." We clinked glasses. Grady drank. Sloane pretended to sip. Then she reached for the envelope. "What's this?" "Proof," I said. She froze. "Proof of what?" "Of everything," I said, my voice calm and steady. "The forged forms, the bank withdrawals, the pharmacy records, the sedatives, all tied up at the bow." I nodded toward the front door. "Detective Morales will be here any minute." Her face drained of color. You called the police?" "I didn't have to," I said. "They called me. Nora sent them everything this morning. They've been waiting for one last confirmation." She looked at Grady, but he was pale and silent. "What is he talking about?" he asked weakly. Sloane's voice trembled for the first time. "He's bluffing." I smiled. "Check the envelope." She did. Inside were photographs. Her at the boutique, her meeting the debt collector, her forged signatures. At the bottom, a printed transcript from the recorder in my pocket. Her voice, clear as crystal. "If we move fast, we can transfer everything before the bank freezes it." The room went silent. Even the clock seemed to pause. Then came the knock at the door. 3 slow, steady raps. Sloane stood, breathing hard. "Alden, we can fix this. We can make it right. You don't have to do this." I looked at her, at the woman who had nearly destroyed everything I'd built. "You had every chance," I said. "All you had to do was love honestly." Grady slumped in his chair, head in his hands. "Dad, I didn't know," he whispered. "I swear I didn't." "I know," I said quietly. "But you didn't look either. And that's almost as bad." The door opened and Detective Morales stepped in, his badge catching the light. "Evening, Mr. Pierce," he said. "We have everything we need." Sloane backed away. "You can't prove." Morales cut her off. "We can, ma'am. You'll have a chance to explain yourself downtown." She looked at me, her face hardening. "You'll regret this, old man." "Maybe," I said, "but I'll regret it standing tall." As Morales led her out, Grady started to speak, but I held up a hand. "Not tonight. Go home. Think. Tomorrow we talk." When the door shut, the house exhaled. The tension drained from the walls. I walked to the window and watched the police car pull away, its taillights fading into the dark. My reflection stared back at me, tired, relieved, but alive in a way I hadn't felt in years. The next morning would change everything. Sloane was about to learn the most expensive lesson of her life. The morning after Sloane's arrest, the world outside looked clean, like the storm had scrubbed it overnight. Snow covered the yard, smooth and untouched. I stood by the window with a mug of coffee, the kind Lila used to make, strong, bitter, honest. My hands were steady. For the first time in months, my reflection didn't look like a man waiting for something terrible to happen. I looked like a man who had faced it and survived, but it wasn't over. I knew that much. The law moved slowly, and pride even slower. There were still lies to untangle, still faces to confront. Nora called at 8. They processed Sloan last night, she said. Morales says she's denying everything, of course. But the evidence is solid. Bank records, recordings, prescriptions. You did well, Alden. I didn't do it for glory, I said. I did it because no one else was going to. I know, she said softly. But be ready. This isn't the end. Grady will come to you. He's confused, ashamed, and angry. And shame has sharp edges. She was right. He showed up that afternoon, standing in my doorway like a man who had been hit by a train he didn't see coming. His eyes were red. Dad, he said, voice cracked. What have you done? What I had to, I said. Come in. He stepped inside but didn't sit. She called me from the station, he said. Said you framed her. Said you planted things. I almost laughed, but the ache in his voice stopped me. Son, I said, look at me. Do I sound like a man who makes up stories? You saw the evidence. You heard the recording. You know the money was gone. Grady rubbed his face. I don't know what I know anymore. I just know everything's falling apart. Sometimes things have to fall apart before they can be put right, I said. He shook his head. You could have come to me, Dad. You didn't have to go to the police. I did come to you, I said quietly. For months. Every Sunday dinner. Every polite warning. Every no you didn't hear. I tried to tell you. But you believe her over me. Grady flinched. He looked smaller than I'd ever seen him. I thought she was helping you, he whispered. I know you did, I said. That's what she counted on. He sat finally, hands clasped like a boy at confession. The bank called, he said. They told me about the forged signature, about the power of attorney. I swear I never signed it. I know, I said again. But you didn't question it when she showed it to you, did you? No, he admitted. She said it was just a precaution. Said you were slipping. I took a deep breath. That's how it starts. A whisper here, a half-truth there. Before long, people start believing the story because it's easier than asking hard questions. He looked up. Did she really drug you? Yes, I said. The tests proved it. Small doses. Just enough to make me seem forgetful, tired, confused. She wanted me dependent. It's what people like her do when they smell inheritance. He covered his face with both hands. God. I let the silence stretch. Let him feel it. I wasn't cruel. Just deliberate. Grady, I'm not angry at you, I said finally. But I am disappointed. You grew up watching your mother and me build this family on honesty. You saw what we gave up for you. And somewhere along the way, you forgot what it meant to stand for something. He nodded slowly. I did. I got lost in trying to keep her happy. She said if I didn't take charge of things, you'd lose everything. I leaned forward. And now you see what that kind of control really looks like. He exhaled. What happens now? Morales will handle the legal side, I said. Fraud, forgery, theft. The courts will sort the rest. But I'm more interested in what happens here. I tapped my chest. Between us. He looked at me, eyes glassy. I don't deserve your forgiveness. Maybe not, I said, but you're still my son. Forgiveness isn't free. It's work. If you're willing to do the work, then maybe one day you'll earn it. He nodded. Tears he didn't bother to hide falling onto his hands. For the first time in years, he looked like the boy I used to carry on my shoulders at the county fair. The boy who trusted me without question. We sat there a while, saying nothing. Then the phone rang. It was Morales. Mr. Pierce, he said, we got something you want to hear? Sloane's changing her story. She's blaming Grady for coercion. Says he knew everything. I closed my eyes. Of course she is. I told her we had proof otherwise, Morales said. She's panicking. It'll unravel soon. When I hung up, I looked at Grady. She's trying to drag you down with her. He didn't even react. I deserve that, he said quietly. No, you don't, I said firmly. You deserve to learn from it. That's what makes the difference between guilt and redemption. The next few days unfolded like a slow tide. News traveled through town. How the perfect daughter-in-law had tried to steal from the old truck man who everyone thought was slipping. Some neighbors looked away when they saw me. Others brought pie. or shook my hand at the diner. "Good on you, Alden," they'd say. "Took guts to stand up like that." I didn't feel brave. I just felt tired, but lighter somehow. Then, one evening, Morales stopped by in person. He stood on my porch, hat in his hand, boots muddy from the thawing roads. "She confessed," he said simply. "Tried to blame it all on desperation. Said the debts got too big, that she thought you wouldn't notice. You'll get most of your money back. The rest will recover through restitution." I nodded slowly. "And Grady?" "Not charged," Morales said. "Her statements cleared him. He's cooperating fully. Seems like he's finally waking up." "That's something," I said. Morales smiled faintly. "You did the right thing, Mr. Pierce. Not everyone in your situation fights back. Most people don't realize how strong they still are." After he left, I sat at the table alone. The same table where it had all begun. The house felt different now. Quiet, but not lonely. I ran my hand over the wood grain and thought of all the meals, the laughter, the arguments. Every scar on that table told a story. This one would, too. Later that night, Grady came back, holding a small box. "Mom's wedding ring," he said. "Sloan pawned it last month. Morales found it." I turned the ring in my palm, the diamond catching the light. "Your mother would have wanted it to stay in the family," I said. He swallowed hard. "If you'll let me, I'd like to fix what I broke. Help you with the house. Be around." I studied him for a long time. "We'll start with dinner on Sunday." I said finally. "You bring the kids. Leave the guilt at home." He nodded, a faint, grateful smile flickering across his face. That night, as I locked the doors and turned off the lights, I caught my reflection once more in the dark window. I thought about Lila, her laughter, her patience, her strength. She'd always said quiet people make the biggest noise when pushed too far. She was right. What Sloan and even Grady hadn't understood was that there's a kind of power that doesn't shout. It doesn't threaten. It waits, watches, and then, when the time is right, it moves with precision. The storm had passed, but I knew one thing for certain. This was only the beginning. I had years of disrespect to address, and I was finally strong enough to do it. News in our town travels like smoke. By midweek, people knew more than I had told them. At the diner, men who used to argue about the price of diesel now argued about Sloan. Some said she was always too shiny. Others said grief makes people do things. I kept my voice small and my coffee hot. Grady sat across from me, like a man learning to walk again. He did not defend her, which was new. He asked about the next steps. I told him the same thing I told myself. We keep showing up. We keep telling the truth. Family lines drew themselves without my permission. Sloane's mother, Tessa, called to say I was cruel and promised lawyers with sharp teeth. She left angry messages on Grady's phone about loyalty, about how I had always looked down on them. I played those messages only once, then deleted them. My sister, May, drove in from 2 towns over a casserole, and the look she used to give me when I lied at age 10. She hugged me hard and whispered, "You waited too long, but you did it right. Not everyone gets both." Morales asked me to come down to sign a few final statements. The station smelled like paper and tired coffee. He read the charges aloud in a calm voice. Fraud, forgery, theft by deception. I did not take joy in any of it. I answered his questions and kept my answers short. On my way out, I stopped at the bulletin board where they post community notices. Pancake breakfast at the firehouse. Coat drive. Ordinary life went on, which felt like a blessing and a rebuke at once. At home, I made lists, locks to change, accounts to monitor, people to thank. Deshaun came by with a box of photos he had printed, each in a plastic sleeve as if evidence also deserved dignity. He stayed long enough to fix a light switch that had been sticking for weeks, then clapped my shoulder and said, "1 mile at a time, boss." Rosa brought Pozo and a stack of mail she had collected when Sloan started forwarding things without asking me. She did not say "I told you so." She did not have to. Sunday dinner returned to my table like a bird that finds its way back after storm. Grady arrived early with Ren and Eli. He set the plates without looking at his phone. He asked where the forks went and listened to the answer. Ren taped a new drawing on my fridge. This one of a truck with a thick bumper and a banner that read "Stronger Now." While the stew simmered, Grady stood by the sink and said the sentence grown men carry like a stone until they put it down. "Dad, I am sorry." I nodded, not to wave it away, but to mark that I had heard him. I told him I expected more than words. He asked what more meant. I said it meant honesty with his kids. It meant therapy he stuck to when it got uncomfortable. It meant returning what could be returned and owning what could not. It meant no more secrets about money. He agreed, his voice steady. He did not ask for a timeline to earn back trust. He understood that clocks work different for broken things. Sloane's lawyer reached out with a proposal: restitution, a plea, community service, counseling. She wanted me to write a character statement saying I believed she could change. I stared at that request built out of tidy words. Nora watched my face. "You do not owe anyone a blessing," she said. I slept on it and woke thinking of Lila at our kitchen table, forgiving people before they deserved it and still insisting they do better. I wrote a letter that told the truth and left the door open, not to my house, but to the person Sloane might decide to become. In the weeks that followed, loyalties announced themselves. A cousin who had not called in years wanted to check how I was holding up and also to ask about the Walnut Fund. I told him I was fine and that the fund now required service hours and sobriety for any disbursements. He did not call back. Deshawn's wife, Alma, sent a note reminding me that when his back went out, I covered their rent for 2 months and never said a word. She wrote, "You do not have to hold your kindness in the dark anymore. It can stand in the light and still be yours." The church pantry needed shelving, so I spent a Saturday there with Reverend Cole and a pair of teenagers who discovered they could lift more than they thought. The work had the clean honesty I had been missing. In the afternoon, Morales stopped by to tell me the plea was accepted. There would be no trial. There would be restitution, supervision, and a program for people who think the only way out is through someone else's pockets. He asked how I felt. I told him I felt like a man who got his name back. Grady and I went through boxes in my attic one evening, the dust catching the light like snow. He found old letters in Lila's hand and cried openly without shame. He admitted he had tried to be the kind of husband who never says no because he was afraid to be left again. I told him this truth I had learned too late. A no said with love can be a boundary that keeps love alive. He wrote it down. He started showing up at the diner with me on Tuesdays, where men paid for our coffee and pretended it was an accident. As for me, I began unveiling small kindnesses I had kept quiet. I told the drivers' families about the Walnut Fund grants in their names each Christmas. I let Rosa hang a plaque at the pantry in Lila's memory. I set aside a scholarship for kids in Wren's school who like to draw trucks and mountains, and anything else that helps them imagine a way forward. None of it was a performance. It was a way to move the weight from my chest to places it could do some good. Sloane sent a letter, not to excuse, to explain. Debt, pride, fear, a recipe that burns anyone who eats it too long. She said she would follow the plan the court laid out. She asked to see the kids with Grady present and a social worker keeping score. I said yes, and I wrote one sentence she could pin to her wall if she wanted. Do the work even when no one is watching. That is the only way this means anything at all. Mercy without a mirror. The house is quiet at night in a way that does not scare me anymore. I sit at the table Lila loved and run my hand across the grain that holds all our old knife marks. Family stopped being a fixed picture and became a moving one. Some faces lean in. Some slide out. The frame holds that the wood is good. Mine is. Our town moved on, as towns do, carrying the story like a smooth stone in its pocket. Sometimes people take it out and feel its shape and then put it back, comforted. When I walk down Main Street, men nod and boys hold the door. Mothers tell me their sons asked what happened, and they told them a man set a boundary and did not move. That is a lesson for boys and girls, for men and women, for anyone who believes love means erasing yourself. It does not. It means standing where you can see the ones you love and letting them see you clear and true. I am clearer now than I have ever been. As the dust settled, everyone realized that I had taught them the most important lesson of their lives. Spring came quietly to Cedar Ridge. The snow melted from the gutters. The air smelled like rain and mud, and the blue house on Cedar Street looked more alive than it had in years. I spent my mornings on the porch, coffee in hand, listening to the town wake up. The mailman waved, the neighbor's dog barked, and kids rode their bikes past like the world had forgiven itself. For the first time in a long time, I felt peace settle into my bones, not the kind that comes from forgetting, but from surviving and learning. Grady came by every Sunday now, early enough to help set the table. He brought the kids, sometimes with flowers, sometimes with paint on their clothes from art projects. He stopped bringing excuses. He asked questions about wiring, about truck engines, about life, the kind of questions sons ask their fathers when they finally remember who taught them how to stand tall. There was a humility to him now, a quiet one. He still carried guilt, but it no longer ruled him. It just reminded him. Sloane's name wasn't spoken much, though her shadow still lingered in small ways. Court-order restitution came through in steady payments, signed in her careful handwriting. I didn't cash the first check right away. It sat on my counter for a week, staring back at me like a test. When I finally took it to the bank, I didn't feel triumph or anger, just closure. Morales said she was doing her hours at a community center in a nearby town, teaching bookkeeping to single mothers, he told me. Seems to be trying. I nodded. Everyone deserves a road back, as long as they walk it. The house changed, too. I replaced old curtains with lighter ones, repainted the walls the soft yellow Lila had once loved, and cleared the attic. Every drawer I opened held ghosts, but I didn't chase them away. I let them remind me of who I'd been, the man who worked until his hands cracked, who believed kindness was stronger than control. I found the notebook where Lila had kept her recipes and her notes for me. On the last page, in her slanted handwriting, she'd written, "You'll know you've healed when you stop proving you're still strong." I smiled at that. I wasn't there yet, but I was close. Sunday dinners grew larger again, this time on my terms. Rosa came over most weeks, bringing tamales or cobbler, and the same loud laugh that could scare the sadness right out of a room. Reverend Cole joined sometimes with his wife, and the kitchen filled with noise that reminded me of holidays before betrayal had touched the air. Grady helped cook, learning the simple things his mother had tried to teach him years ago. Wren sat on the counter, swinging her legs, asking endless questions. Eli followed me around the yard, pretending his toy hammer could fix anything I pointed at. At one of those dinners, Grady cleared his throat halfway through dessert. "Dad," he said, "I've been thinking I'd like to buy part of the old warehouse by the river, the one you used to own. Turn it into a restoration shop, old engines, antiques, something we could run together." I looked at him for a long moment. The boy who'd once thought success meant leaving everything behind was now talking about coming home. "That's honest work," I said. "Hard work." "I know," he said. "I need that now. Something real. Something that lasts." "Then we'll do it," I said. "But we do it slow and we do it right. No shortcuts." He smiled. "No shortcuts," he repeated, as if it were a promise. Days found their rhythm again. I went back to volunteering at the food pantry, where my hands remembered how to lift without trembling. Rosa teased me for organizing the chaos out of the storage room. "You always need to build something," she said, "even when it's not broken." She wasn't wrong. Some men fix to live. I'm one of them. Letters started arriving from people I hadn't heard from in years. Old drivers from the company. Families of men I'd helped. One note was from a boy whose father had died on the job decades ago. The Walnut Fund had quietly paid for his schooling. "I never got a thank you," he wrote. "Now I'm a teacher." I read that one twice and kept it in my wallet. Every morning, I made a point of walking to the diner. The regulars still argued about football and gas prices, but when I walked in, they nodded in a way they hadn't before. Not because I was some kind of hero, but because they saw something familiar in me. Every man in that diner had his own storm story. Some fought it, some drowned in it. The only difference was that mine had gone public. As for Sloane, time would do what time always does. It would decide who she became. I didn't wish her harm. I wished her wisdom. Some nights, I thought about her sitting at a desk, teaching numbers to people who trusted her because they had to. Maybe that was her punishment, or maybe it was her chance to start over. Either way, I hope she took it. The biggest change came the day I met with Nora to update my estate. You built protection, she said, flipping through the papers. Now build purpose. That sentence stuck. So I added new clauses to the Walnut Fund. Scholarships for kids from working families. Support for elderly neighbors who still wanted to live on their own. Grants for small-town truck mechanics, starting their first shop. Lila's words echoed in my mind. Strong trees grow slow, but they keep growing. Ren helped me design the foundation's logo, a small walnut tree with roots that curled into the shape of two hands. When she finished, she looked up at me. "Grandpa," she said, "this is your legacy, isn't it?" I laughed softly. "Maybe, but legacies aren't what we leave behind, sweetheart. They're what we build while we're still here." That night, after everyone had gone home, I stood outside under the wide spring sky. The porch light hummed softly, and the scent of earth carried through the air. I thought of Lila again, not as a ghost, but as a quiet presence that had guided every step I took to get here. I imagined her smile, the way her eyes used to crease when she said, "You'll always find your way back." And I had. The next morning, I woke before sunrise and brewed a pot of coffee. I wrote letters, one each of my grandchildren, to be opened when they turned 18. I told them that strength wasn't about winning fights or earning money. It was about telling the truth, about standing your ground when it costs you something, and about loving people enough to hold them accountable. I sealed each envelope and tucked them into the drawer beside Lila's notebook. A week later, Grady and I signed a lease for the old warehouse. The place smelled like oil and dust and second chances. We spent the afternoon cleaning it out, talking little but working side by side. When we finally stepped outside, hands black with grease, the sun dipped behind the water, lighting the sky orange and gold. Grady looked at me and said, "It feels good, doesn't it?" "It does," I said. "Feels like home." As we locked up, Ren ran up the hill toward us, waving a drawing. It was a warehouse, freshly painted, with a sign above the door that read Pearson Sun Restoration. Underneath, she'd drawn 3 stick figures holding hands. I felt something move in my chest, something warm and alive. I knelt down, kissed her forehead, and said, "That's perfect." That evening, as the last light faded from the sky, I sat on the porch with Rosa and listened to the crickets begin their nightly chorus. The world had changed around me, but it hadn't beaten me. It had just reminded me what mattered. Sometimes the people we think are weakest turn out to be the strongest of all. And I had proven that quiet strength can move mountains. Not with anger, not with noise, but with patience, truth, and a heart that refused to stop believing in decency. As the breeze carried the scent of fresh rain, I closed my eyes and whispered to the night, "We made it, Lila." And for the first time in years, I felt her answer in the wind. Did you like my story? And which city are you listening from? Let's meet in the comments. If you liked the story, you can support me by sending a super thanks so I can keep bringing more stories like this. Thank you so much for your sweet support. I'm looking forward to your comments on the story. On the screen, you can see 2 new life stories that I highly recommend. There's so much more on my channel. Don't forget to subscribe. See you in the next life story.